Well, folks, Part 2 of the Cost of Living Relief Act has now officially passed through the House of Commons, through the Canadian Senate, and now has become law, meaning 2 new benefits have come into effect, and they are 100% confirmed. There's nothing that can stop them now. And inside of this bill, where some changes were made, we get more details on how you can apply, how much they are, as well as some changes that we weren't expecting to see. So today's just going to be a quick video letting you know all the details about this, everything that you need to know about it. So let's get right in. Oh, that's the wrong view. Here we go. Here is the bill. Let's get right into it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you can keep on getting these Canadian updates. Like I said, this is an act respecting cost of living measures related to dental care and rental housing. These are the 2 benefits that were included inside of this bill C-31 that was just passed yesterday. You might be familiar with Bill C-30, which actually passed a little while ago. That was the one that confirmed the GST doubling for 6 months, which ended up not being 2 separate doubling of your GST payments that you typically get quarterly every 3 months. It turned out to be a one-time payment that was for the amount of your 2 next GST benefits up front. So you kind of got that one-time payment. You shouldn't expect to see any more boosts like that on your GST. That was a one-time payment, but that is a little bit different from what we're talking about today, the dental care and rental housing benefit that have now come into effect. So obviously this bill is pretty dense, but I'm just going to go over the highlights, the things you need to know, the application periods, when you can apply, how much you can expect to get, other special considerations that you need to think about. So let's get right into the main thing that people are going to be wondering, which is eligibility for this dental benefit. Now, this dental benefit has been brought along by the partnership between the NDP and the Liberals. The NDP have been heavily pushing for a dental benefit for a long time, and they said, hey, if we support you Liberals, we're going to help you pass this bill, and that is exactly what they've done here. Now, the NDP did want this dental benefit to be for everybody in the country, and this is their ideal position that they're trying to push the Liberals toward, and what the Liberals have said they're going to implement over the next years by 2025, I believe they said. But this first round of this dental benefit is going to people with children 12 and under, to pay for those children who are 12 and under to get dental care. Now, we'll likely get a press release from probably the CRA to give you more details on how to apply for this in terms of what website to go to, but I can tell you what the application requirements are and what that application is going to look like, just not where it is going to be available. The first thing to note here is that your family income has to be under $90,000 to qualify for it based on your last year's tax returns. So this is something that's going to apply to absolutely everybody. If you're making over that amount, you're not going to get any dental benefit. But even if you're making under that amount, you might not get the full dental benefit amount, the full payment, because this is set up on an income scale, but we'll get into that in just a moment. And this benefit kind of works similar to the way that the CERB and the CRB did, in that there's 2 different periods that you can apply for this in, and you have to apply in that period to get that period's extra money. But we can go into the details here. It says for the first period, actually, let me scroll up here. For the first period, an eligible parent may, in this period, which starts on December 1st, 2022, coming up rather soon, you could start to apply for this money, and ending on June 30th, 2023, those eligible parents can apply to the Minister for this dental benefit in respect of each of their qualified dependents. So for every child who's qualified, based on what we're going to go over here, you can apply for this dental benefit. And I made a quick correction here. It's under 12 years of age, not 12 and under. So that's a mistake on my part from earlier in the video. So those are the main qualifications for your child. It just needs to be under 12 years of age. Now, the same goes for the second period. The kid still has to be under 12 years of age, but that period starts on July 1st, 2023 and ends on June 30th, 2024, right? So this is 2 separate years of benefits that you can apply for, all because of this bill. Otherwise, they'd have to sort of make another bill if they were just to do this one benefit period at a time. But an important thing to note here is that while this does come with 2 individual benefits, 2 individual payments, you have to apply for this first period within the first period. You can't wait until the second period, apply once, and then apply again during that second period to get 2 payments. You have to, if you want both payments, you have to apply for each payment in that period. You can't just double up on the second period if you didn't apply for the first one. But another very important thing that will make you either qualified or not is whether or not you have any other kind of dental coverage. This section here essentially is saying for each child that you apply for, you have to make sure that that child doesn't receive any other kind of dental funding, either from some sort of private dental plan or one that is applied to you based on your employer. If that dental work is covered in any way, even if it's partial, it seems, looking for clarity here in case I'm incorrect on this assumption, but even if it is a sort of partial payment by your works plan, you wouldn't be eligible for this. This is for people who don't have any kind of coverage for their children's dental care. Now, this is where things get a little bit more dense because now we're talking about the application for this benefit. If you want to apply for this benefit and you think that your kid is entitled to this extra money, you've got to fill out a big form. It's likely going to be online, but we're going to have to wait and see how they actually implement this. But there are a number of things that you need to include inside of that application to make sure that you're eligible for this money. First off, you need to include your name and the address, the applicant, likely your child's name as well, an attestation basically saying that, hey, all the eligibility criteria that we talked about and some other more fine points about like needing to be a Canadian permanent resident or citizen. There's a number of sort of minutia there that won't apply to everybody. You need to say, yes, this is true, and I am certifying that this is true. That's your attestation. Then it gets a little bit more complicated because the government essentially is trying to avoid a situation like they kind of saw with CERB where people were getting money who weren't qualified for it. So this is how they're going to make sure that you are qualified for this. And for the folks who are just tuning in for the rental benefit portion, don't worry, we're going to get to that as soon as we're finished the dental portion here. You got to include the name, address, and telephone number of the dentist or anyone who's doing this work. You've got to include that information so that the government, if they're doing spot checks, can call and say, hey, did this person actually get this dental work done, and did it amount to the amount that they actually applied for with the benefit, just to make sure that people aren't sort of scraping this money and using it for other things than the dental benefit. Now, inside of this, they'll also confirm that the work was done in the period that you're applying for it in, either in application period 1 or application period 2. That's next year. Now, moving on here, this gets a little bit more information, it gets a little bit more interesting because you have to include the name, address, telephone number of your employer and of your spouse's employer if you have one. You have to provide that information. Again, if the government is spot checking, they're going to call your employer and say, hey, do you actually have dental coverage here? Was this a fraudulent application? So it seems like they're trying to cover their bases in this legislation. Now, if they actually have the manpower or not to actually go out there and make all of these calls to check things is another story. But I think that they're sort of trying to avoid a situation where people get money that they're not entitled to. And then also there's a blanket statement here saying any other information that the minister may require. This is essentially referring to the person who brought this bill on, which is Chrystia Freeland, who essentially gets to set any other sort of regulations. And this is what one of these is. The minister, Chrystia Freeland in this case, can say, okay, I also need this information for you to be eligible, just giving them a catch-all to make changes to the application so that it actually fits inside this bill. But now we get into the amounts, and this is where it is income tested, meaning the more you make, the less you get from the benefit. You're going to get this full $650 per child if your income is less than $70,000, and I believe that this is household income. Now the scale continues that if you make more than $70,000 but under $80,000, again, this is after tax or your income as listed on your taxes, then you're going to get $390 per child, and then scaling down here in terms of payment amount. If you're making more than $80,000 but less than $90,000, you're going to get $260 per child, and then of course, like we said before, this $90,000 is the limit for this benefit. And now for the last little bit on this dental benefit, if you apply fraudulently and you're caught, then there's going to be a penalty, right? The minister says that they can impose a penalty on a person if the minister is of the opinion that that person has committed a violation. So applying fraudulently, if they saw that you weren't eligible for the benefit but you applied for it, you could be penalized. Now the maximum that you can be penalized is 50% of the dental benefit that you applied for, right? So maximum $650, this is $325 if you qualified for that $650 and you applied for that $650. If they find that you weren't eligible, you'll have to pay back that benefit and then an additional $325. So that is the maximum penalty per period, I suppose. I guess you could commit a violation 2 times in a row. Now let's get into this $500 one-time rental payment. The idea of this bill is to give folks who are struggling with the rising cost of living and they are renting their homes to give them a little bit of extra money to make ends meet. Again, up for debate how much $500 is going to help when average rents are far higher than that, but that is a discussion for another time. Now, one thing that's interesting that I found when I reread this bill now that it's been passed, it seems that some alterations have been made because we're getting sort of different signals about how you're going to be eligible or how you're going to apply for this benefit. Previously, it was my understanding that this benefit was going to be distributed through the Canada Rental Benefit, something that sort of the province and all the different provinces and the federal government have sort of partnered on to disperse. Now it seems like there might be a little bit of a difference here, meaning if you're eligible for this rental housing benefit, but you weren't already a part of the previous benefits and the previous supports that have come out, then you might actually still be able to get on board with this one. Now, just like we talked about with the dental benefit, we're going to get into the eligibility and what this application could look like. Again, a surprising change there. We've got eligibility here. You have to be over at least 15 years of age on the reference day, the day that you're applying for this benefit. You have to be alive, of course, a resident of Canada, and you have to have filed your tax return, that's your return of income, no later than the 120th day after the reference day. So you got to make sure that your taxes are filed so that the government can make sure, hey, you actually qualify for this benefit because this one is income tested as well. And this is where the income testing comes into play, because if you want this $500 benefit, you have to make sure that if you have a spouse or common law partner, your joint income can't be over $35,000. And this is a spouse or common law partner. Or if you're a single parent that has a qualified dependent, then you can be making $35,000 and still receive this benefit. For people who are just single and they're the only income earner in the house, well, you can make a maximum of $20,000 and still be able to apply for this rental housing benefit of $500. Now, if you are applying for this benefit and you're using the sort of spouse or common law partner application to qualify under the $35,000 income mark, you unfortunately won't be able to apply for this benefit for each of you, only for one person in that couple, right? So for every person that applies, you can't double up if you're using your spouse or common law partner. You can only get it once between the two of you. Another important thing to note is that the rent that you pay has to be at least 30% of your income. This is why it's so important that you file your taxes if you're applying for these government benefits, because they're going to use your previous year's tax return to see how much you made, and you've got to make sure that the rent is at least 30% of the total income that you showed. I guess this is kind of for fringe cases because I don't know many places that you can rent for less than 30% of a $20,000 salary, right? That's not too common across Canada these days, but I guess that's why it's in here, is for these fringe cases. So just like the dental benefit, you also have to attest or say that all of this information is accurate, including the rental amount that you're saying you paid during 2022, as well as the address of that residence that you were paying rent on, as well as the name and contact information of the person to whom the rent was paid. Again, it looks like the government is really getting serious about, hey, we have all the information now so we can fact check you, so we better not see any fraudulent applications in this one. Now, this is where things get a little bit wonky because this is the application section, and we're going to go over it here and I'm going to explain exactly what this means. They say an application for the benefit must be in the form and manner established by the minister and be made no earlier than the reference day and no later than the 120th day after the reference day. So let's start with this, the reference day. You have to apply for this benefit no earlier than the reference day, which refers to the day that this bill comes into effect, which I believe was likely yesterday, the day it received royal assent, and no later than the 120th day after the reference day. So you have roughly 120 days in order to apply for this benefit. But how you apply, that's still a little bit up in the air as of this bill. Again, like I said, we previously thought that it would be only people who had already sort of applied for the Canada Housing Benefit, a benefit that's sort of a partnership between the provinces and the federal government. But now it seems like that is kind of up in the air because of this line. This application must be in the form and manner established by the minister. This is essentially language saying, hey, we don't know exactly how we're going to do the applications yet, but once we pass this bill, the minister via regulation can make this decision, right? they can alter how people apply for this, and they don't need to pass this information through the House of Commons to get it confirmed. This is just something that can be, via regulation, changed by the minister. So we could see this benefit opening up to more Canadians that hadn't previously applied and become eligible for the Canada Housing Benefit. People who meet all these qualifications, but maybe they weren't included in their provincial rental housing benefit in the past. So that's a little bit interesting. We don't know how that application is going to go, whether it is going to be distributed through the individual provinces and handled by that, or if it will be something like CERB or CRB where you can just log into the CRA website or call directly to the phone line and apply for this benefit and attest that yes, you are qualified based on all the things that we discussed and all the things that will be on the website eventually when they get it up. So let me know what you think about all this. Now that these two major cost of living relief bills have passed, do you think that this is quite enough from the government in order to support people with the rising cost of living, inflation sticking around at 6.9%? Or do you think that they should go a little bit farther, even though they are scared of this sort of fighting against what the Bank of Canada is trying to do with the interest rates? But that's for another video, that whole discussion. Let me know down below, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. If anything changes here or any other benefits pop up that I think could help you through, if you're someone who's struggling with the rising cost of living, then I'm going to make the video right here. So make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you keep on getting notified. But with all of that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.